All day long, we alternate between mist and rain. Mist that slopes in stealthily, cloaking and shrouding trees, vistas, the edges of things becoming blunt, soft, folding in to become opaque, invisible. The clothes that I washed almost a week ago haven't yet dried. I had left them hanging on the clothesline outside in hopes of tempting out a weak sun from behind the clouds while the mist soaked into them, inhabiting them. My clothes now scented with wet earth and rain. It infused them with its own pungent smells, odors of decay, of rot, of excess, of overripeness. The mist feels cool and damp. It brings forth ghosts like vapors. The ghosts remind us of deep time, carrying echoes of erasure, of removal and repressions, of evictions, uprootings, untimely deaths. Every landscape, as we now know, is haunted by past ways of life. The hauntings and ghostly afterlives point to our forgetting, showing us the lingering residue of earlier tracks held within topographical memory. These spectral traces rupture the linearity of time, and in doing so, they reveal much more to us. I invite you into this landscape where assemblages of the dead gather together with the living, and it is only with these ghosts and with this togetherness can we understand life and livability. Night falls and the mist remains. I watch the street below as car headlights lose their brilliance, bouncing light in concentric smoky circles, and we begin to be disoriented. We begin to lose our sense of time and space. I take a walk to find myself and to lose myself. in this land and forestscape where I share presence with many other beings. Then rain, loud, heavy, slashing against the hills, splattering mud everywhere, soaking the narrow trails called pagdandis so that we slip and slide in the keychair as we attempt to make our way up or down the steep sloping terrain. We wait. I watch. I spend long afternoons staring into the rain, looking at trees. Their green is alive and spectacular. To watch the passing of a thunderstorm is no ordinary event. I become a cloud. I feel the discourse of winds moving through me, dense and billowing, laden with water, carrying the weight of evaporations from hours and days past. Imagine weeks as vapor without condensing. What happens when clouds do not meet? The moisture in the trees must commune with the moisture in the skies for there to be rain. In the absence of this confluence, rain does not pour. I yearn for precipitation, to fall back onto the earth in a drizzle. Can a raindrop sense time? When it shatters upon contact with soil, does it transfer its knowledge from the atmosphere to land? When it touches me, can it change me? I go looking to gather memories and testimonials and a witnessing of what existed before. Where do I begin? I find traces in strange places. A burned fireplace in a colonial era hotel. Bricks fired in kilns that don't exist anymore. Plants seeking pollinators that vanished decades ago. Eroded rock face, bearing the fossilized memory of a stream that no longer flows. That water had already been directed into a waiting reservoir. And in some years, the emptiness of a desiccated basin, cement and layers of paint wrinkling beneath the sun. The living and the no longer living inhabitants of the forest guide me towards a multiplicity of temporalities. I seek out conversations with ghosts to be reminded that we live in an impossible present. A time of rupture, of endings, and of mortality. We are told that we are living in a world haunted by the threat of extinction, and again, we choose to ignore that we are living in a world already becoming extinct. For extinction is a multi-species event, occurring in stages and assemblages, in visible and invisible stages, leaving behind gaps where there were once assemblages. These assemblages meant relationships and interdependencies, cosmologies, and worlds and ways of life and living. Extinction unravels and undoes these. In spirals, in cascades, and in vortexes. All this to say, it has already begun. This is a dirge. As the anthropologist Deborah Bird Rose writes, extinction is a double death. It extinguishes times yet to come. I made frequent walks in the forest, sometimes foraging for mushrooms, sometimes tracking leopards, looking for dark bungalows. Surrounded by remnants of colonial infrastructure, I began to perceive a different kind of temporality. At once more historic and yet contemporary, at once more vital and yet fragile. A temporality of the forest, the time of daisy blooms, the start of snake season, monsoon time, lichen time, renewal time, tourist time, spore time, pollen time, pollination time, cicada breeding season, off-peak season, when the tourists leave, dry season, fire season, firefly season, full moon nights, moonless nights. I start to sense the ghosts. They appear all around me. In the forest, I find myself contemplating life and decay. The life of a 500-year-old pine tree. The lives of rock formations that began over 50 million years ago. The life of a plastic packet of crisps, doomed to exist forever, to be dead, but to never dissolve. The rapid accumulation of plastic trash on the mountainside. The arrival of wild boar following a trash trail, previously unseen at these heights. The disappearance of spotted deer from the forest, which were the immediate food of the leopard in the food chain. The leopard now turning its hunger and appetites towards cattle reared by local villagers, and looking for prey elsewhere. As I walk in these forests, I am propelled into future time. Bit by bit, the forest is withdrawing, one sense at a time. At times, I smell trash instead of fir and pine. Other times, I hear the highway, traffic jams, constant honking, engines revving, instead of wind and bird song. One day, not so far away, perhaps there will come a time when I will stop seeing the forest. By then, the forest will have fully withdrawn, fully disappeared, have been fully removed from time. Adrian Rich writes, I won't tell you where the place is, the dark mesh of the woods, meeting the unmarked strip of light, ghost-ridden crossroads, leaf mold paradise. I already know who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. And I won't tell you where it is, so why do I tell you anything? Because you still listen. Because in times like these, to have you listen at all, it's necessary to talk about trees. Shifting terrain, I think of olive trees. I think of Palestine. I think of life. I think of orange orchards in Gaza, wild akub and za'atar in Jerusalem and Upper Galilee. I know already who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. I return to the forest with this question. How does one tell impossible stories? I can't seek out direct answers. Instead, I sense my way towards them. नहीं निगाह में मंजिल तो जुस्तजू ही सही, नहीं विसाल मुयस्सर तो आरज़ू ही सही. This translates to, if the destination is not visible, at least there is a quest. If a reunion with the beloved is not possible, then longing will have to suffice. नहीं निगाह में मंजिल तो जुस्तजू ही सही, नहीं विसाल मुयस्सर तो आरज़ू ही सही. I look outside of the archive. I ready myself for testimonies that are rendered immaterial because no one was there to receive them, to witness them, to record them into history. I let the outside in. I traverse time's other side. Your memory gets in the way of my history. How can we switch from ordinary to sacred time? I have been advised to do it recklessly, without signal. My history gets in the way of your memory. What does imperial debris look like? How can we discern the tangibility of colonial pasts and presents? I begin to think of all the ways in which space was transformed. Soil was turned toxic, turned into a plantation. Ties between people and place was severed. And as Anna Singh and Donna Haraway reiterate, the capacity to love and care for place is radically incompatible with the plantation. What were empire building and imperial formations if not plantation making? In the 19th century, following severe outbreaks of cholera, typhoid, malaria, and other diseases including the plague, British colonial administrators enclosed commons across the colonies in South and Southeast Asia to construct therapeutic landscapes as healing zones. At a remove from the perceived urban infested areas, these areas of higher altitude were given a new identity and purpose. Terraformed as hill stations, they perpetuated idyllic settler colonialist visions of pastoral England. What happened to these in-between spaces of English simulacrum in the colonial hinterlands? These sites currently exist as locations of exhausted geography, the land unable to sustain the tourists that visit annually, tracing well-trod pathways in the colonizers' footsteps, continuing to seek the healing hillside air to escape the scorched plains. The intrinsic extractive intent has not altered in the handover from colony to post-colony. The forest is now a strange mix of pine, fir, and trash as tourism infrastructure has failed to develop efficacious waste management and sanitation, yet continues to sell dreams without pause, with no end in sight. The detritus of humans is a new kind of empire, slowly taking over, engulfing entire forests, towns, streams, and mountains. The debris of capitalist waste and the unspectacular afterlives of discarded things are stockpiled across mountainsides. Ghosts of extractive colonialism mingle with neon-tinged apparitions of capitalism in the old new world of hill stations turned into tourist towns with monoculture tea plantations, telecom networks, and luxury hotels. This promise of futurity is empty and homogeneous. It remains hollow while filling countless imaginations. How do colonial relations between people and land persist despite political independence? What can we do to co-produce decolonial alternatives? What can relationships of love and care look like in this fragile ecosystem on the precipice of collapse? How to love a tree. two characters are conversing with each other across time and space. The first, Sajid, a local forest guard in Nathia Gali, and the second, John, the ghost of an imperial botanist who was residing inside a tree for over 200 years until the tree is killed off. Why was the tree killed, you might ask? Colonial forestry law assumed ownership and possession of forests and trees. This was done with a mind to commercially exploit forests to extract timber for railways, building ships, and to clear land for plantations. After decolonization, forest-related laws continue to operate with the same principle: ownership and control. During the 1990s in Pakistan, after severe flooding, all commercial activity in the forest was halted. Local villagers protested as they needed firewood to warm their homes and to cook food. A clause was introduced. The villagers could log any dead, dry, or diseased tree for firewood. This logic opened up a loophole. Locals began to strip off tree bark with their axes, drying out and killing trees. Sometimes they would burn parts of the trunk to hide the axe marks. First, colonialism and then coloniality have impoverished this entire region. Last year, I invited 4 musicians to play a concert to 4 different dying trees as a gesture of love and care. The forest constitutes a vast archaeological archive, and all the beings that live within and around are speaking to us. Somehow, we have forgotten their language. We have lost it from our tongues and cannot seem to understand or make legible what is being urgently expressed. This is one of the tasks set upon the forest garden, the botanist, to try to recover a language to read the signs, to communicate and dialogue amongst species once more, to gather a witnessing of history from more than human perspectives. After realizing that he is now seeing John everywhere that he goes, and wherever his gaze lands, Sajid asks John, "How do you appear everywhere that I go?" John, I had spent a lot of time in these forests. One day, after months of sickness, instead of dying, my spirit went into a tree. Yes, the same one that you were examining last week. I became part of that tree and began living inside it. Somewhere in this conversation, they have entwined their hands. John is tracing out the lines of fate on Sajid's palm. Sajid, why did you reveal yourself to me? John, because you wanted to know how to love a tree. You didn't ask, but you wanted to know all the same. Thank you.